Hello, my name is Sandy Adamitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey writers, it's Sandy. Today we have the talented and charming Kelly Edwards. Kelly was a former television executive who has developed shows like Living Single, Girlfriends, The Parkers, Clueless, and Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza. Kelly wrote the bestseller, The Executive Chair, A Writer's Guide to TV Series Development. And if you want to write for television, get this book. The Executive Chair is like getting the playbook of the other team, but ethical. Kelly is currently a producer and television writer. Let's start the show. Kelly Edwards, thank you so much for joining us on the Writers Hangout.
My pleasure.
How are you doing on this chilly 72-degree day in Los Angeles?
I'm great. I'm actually this time of year I'm usually in Montana, where I guess a couple of days ago they had 7 inches of snow dumped on them. So I'm doing really well.
Get out of town. I'm actually jealous because who doesn't love the snow when you can't have it?
That's right. That's why I have the best of both worlds. I can be here and be there depending on my mood. So it's
That
all
is
good.
that is so great. Hey, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
What a great book. I loved it cover to cover.
It's always nice to hear. You're not quite sure how people are going to receive things. And quite honestly, before it actually dropped, I was panicking because I thought, oh my gosh, what if people don't respond to it? All sorts of terrible things run through your mind as you were about to release, something out there into the world. And so I'm glad that people seem to be finding some great takeaways from it.
Yes, and why didn't someone write it before? Just bravo to you.
Quite honestly, I'm actually surprised that someone hadn't written it before. I happened to be on I guess, sort of a mentoring call with some folks, and one of the women who was on the call said, "Hey, I think there's a book in you. Do you mind if I put you in touch with my publisher?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." And I spoke to him, and I said, "Well, I've got a couple of chapters on my laptop already about writing or about diversity programs." And he said, "No one's ever written a book about development from the executive point of view." And I said, I laughed at him and I said, "That can't possibly be right." And he said, "Google it." So I Googled it and went on, a couple of book sites and found that in fact no one had. But it was something that had already been in the back of my head because I had been, going to conferences and doing panels. And for the longest time, I would get the same questions that would come up over and over again. And I would impart all those, those answers to the people who were going through any program that I was doing. But I kind of felt like it's the kind of information that everyone should have access to. And I didn't understand why the executives, we sort of, and I will sort of put my executive hat on for a minute. We have this sort of shorthand or this information that we all know, but we don't really think about telling other people. I thought, well, if everybody else out there knows some of the things and why we think the way that we think, why don't we let them know it? Because that way, it'll make everyone's life easier. It'll make their lives easier because they won't be going over some of the stumbling blocks, and it'll make our lives easier because they will already come equipped, when the time comes. So
Correct.
I was just as shocked as you are that that no one had done before. Now it's out there. Now it's done.
Great. Kelly, would you like to play a game of Would You Rather before we continue?
Oh my Lord. I don't know. Sure. Let's get
Okay, here we go. First one. Would you rather live a peaceful life in a small cabin in the woods or a drama filled life in a mansion in a big city?
Oh, okay, that's easy for me. Peaceful life.
After you
100.
said Montana, I think I figured that one out.
Honestly, when I get to Montana, the moment I step off the plane, it is like this calm comes over my entire body. And I get what I call city amnesia because I completely forget that there is the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles or New York or any of those, places that I frequent. I completely forget it's there. And I completely understand why people up there just they move at a slower pace. Things, as time slows down, they really do take a lot more care and enjoyment out of just the simple things. So I would definitely take the cabin in the woods, simple life.
Perfect. Would you rather have a tattoo of the title of the last script you read or the last TV show you watched?
Oh wow. What was the last TV show I watched? Oh, you know what? The last TV show I'd probably take the TV show
Oh,
because the
what was
last this last script I read was Pirates of the Caribbean. I went back and reread the script. And I think that would have been weirder than if I got the last show that I watched, which was Manifest. And I think Manifest,
Oh, Manifest works. Yes. Would you rather lose your keys or your cell phone?
cell phone. I would give up my cell phone in a second. It's annoying.
Okay. Would you rather be a fantastic storyteller inspired by embarrassing moments or never do anything embarrassing but have funny stories?
Oh wow. I feel like I'm in a walking embarrassment all the time. I'm constantly doing things that are um I think that's part of the fun of life is that you're constantly putting your foot in your mouth or doing something ridiculous. So I will go with imperfection every time.
Okay. Would you rather get a glimpse of the future or forget something from your past?
Ooh. Or forget something from my past. So the question is, what would I forget? Could I forget a person?
Sure.
There are some really terrible relationships I would love to get rid of, but I would say I'd love. I think I'm a future person. I want to know what the future holds, so long as it's not my death. In which case, I
Yeah.
don't want to know
Yeah. No death. Okay.
that.
Would you rather have to watch only drama films or only TV dramas for the next year?
Ooh, TV dramas or film dramas? I would go with TV dramas.
I
Now, I'm not.
agree.
I'm look. I'm actually more of a comedy person in general.
Mhm.
So you asked me if I had to give up comedy, I would have a harder time with that. But I will say I'm absolutely okay giving up film for TV.
Sidebar, what's your favorite comedy film?
Of all time? Well, of
Yeah.
all, oh sure. And I write some of these in the book. So I love. Well, first of all, I love Role Models, one of my favorite of all time. It's just so it just fires on all cylinders at all. Every minute there's like a hilarious turn. I just rewatched The Long Shot, the Charlize Theron, Seth Rogen movie, which I think is also one of my faves. So good.
Yes, I want to watch that.
But some of my favorites of all time, I think, are there was a movie in the gosh, I think in the 40s called A Song is Born with Danny Kaye and Virginia Mayo. That's one of my favorites. I still think that that's although every Danny Kaye movie ever made, I think I was a huge Danny Kaye
Are
fanatic
you
when
a Danny Kaye fan?
oh yes, I've seen everything.
Oh,
Everything. I just loved him. I think and again, he's the master of physical comedy.
put the pill in the what is that? What am I
Yes.
thinking of?
The poison is in the vessel with the pestle. The chalice
Oh,
is the brew that is true. No, they broke the chalice in the palace. Now it's the flagon with the dragon, has the pellet with the poison. It's such a brilliant
I'm so impressed.
well, don't be don't be
Okay.
but I
Would would you rather swim with sharks? Oh, we're getting dark here now. Sorry. Would you rather swim with sharks or run into a serial killer while hiking?
oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
I know. I don't know where I came up with that one.
Oh. Oh, I take my chances with the sharks, I think. That's awful. Let's hope that never happens.
Last one. Would you rather have an extra 10K in your budget every episode or a shaded parking spot with your name on it next to the front door of the first floor writer's office?
Definitely the parking spot because 10K doesn't really go very far.
You know
So, I
what,
mean,
Kelly? I adore you now. I have asked that question to other people and they always go, oh no, 10K in the budget. And I'm thinking, that parking
now,
space saves so
yeah,
much time.
yeah, that's like a bunch of red vines. That doesn't give 10K doesn't really give you a whole lot. Yeah,
Red
that's crap.
vines.
Yeah.
Okay. The executive chair. What does a creative exec do while you're in that executive chair?
Okay. Well, there's, the role of the executive is really to breathe life, to marshal, let's just say, to guide the development process. So from idea through the draft phase, through the finals, to getting picked up, to getting something produced, going through post, and then to air, the development executive really does sort of keep that whole train moving
Hmm.
and from point A to point B. So, when I was sitting in the executive ranks, an idea would come through the doors, or I would pitch out an idea to a writer quite often, and they'd come back with a take on it, and then we'd work the idea, work the material, make sure that the drafts were progressing, and then finally, we would get it through the pickup stage and then produce it. An executive is part of every single part of that, and has to understand character and story. They have to understand also the inner workings of their own company, what will do well on their air as best they can. They're also dealing with marketing and sales and promos and publicity. So there's a big job that an executive is responsible for. And then once, the pieces, whatever that pilot is, gets picked up, it's hiring the crew, hiring the writing staff, hiring the directors, sitting on set, making sure that the production is giving us what we need and what we want, and then making sure that once it's on air, that it stays on air. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, and don't forget that once you're doing it for one, you're doing it for um, many, many, many scripts as well at the same time. So you're juggling
I
all of
was just going
that.
to say that it's not like you get three projects and that's it for you, Kelly, that for the whole year. It's so much work. And while you're working, you are searching
That's
for
right.
more material.
It never ends, and your days are usually filled with meetings. So it's a meeting every hour on the hour. There's usually a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner that you're also doing. There's sometimes screenings. There's a lot of you're reading material, so you're reading new writers, um, and again, those pitches take, it takes time and energy, and you are constantly assessing whether or not something is going to work for your audience or whether it's not. And so it's a very big job. It's nonstop. You're always on the go.
Right.
Your weekends are spent reading scripts and watching cuts of things and doing notes. There's very rarely any downtime. So
Goodness.
it can be incredibly draining, but also incredibly exhilarating. And it's fun. I mean, where else can you sort of think about story all day? It's a magical kind of world, and we're lucky to be a part of it.
You're very unique in the sense of you're a creative exec and you jumped over to the writing side. You see it all the time that creative execs will become producers. Being a creative exec takes determination. Jumping over to the writer side, that takes enormous guts. I probably could say that better, but just takes guts. And then you wrote this terrific book. What has kept you going through all these demanding jobs?
Well, I feel like my mother used to get really freaked out because every 6 or 7 years I would jump ship from a fantastic job where I was getting paid well, and I would pivot into something completely different. And so for a while there, it used to freak her out, and
Oh,
then
I
she started
bet.
no, she's at the learning curve. It's time for her to pivot. So I feel like it's something that is kind of part of my nature to, as I say, just sort of jump off the gangplank into the water, into the shark infested water. So I, I started off my career on the film side and then took a hard left over to TV, which at the time there was not this connective tissue that there is now. Now there's people sort of move back and forward through TV and film. I think more on the writing side, sometimes on the executive side, but then it was really really unusual. And then I was at Fox for a while, then UPN, and then I decided to go produce. So I took that again another leap into producing and produced a show for Paramount, and then went into diversity, which was a complete new kind of field, I think, for a lot of folks in town. And then from there, developed more, and that was a corporate job, and then developed more of the programmatic kinds of things over at HBO. So again, it was sort of a big, you know, head twist into a different place. I will say though that this transition from executive to writer is not as unusual as you'd think. I waited 30 years to do it as opposed to 5. So I do think that when people are coming into the ranks of either executives or writers, they're still in the beginning of their career. They're still trying to figure out who they are. And making that switch early on, you may have had one executive job and then you make the leap, or you've been an executive assistant and you make that leap.
Yes.
So I think I think they're one and the same. We're using the same brain capacity. We're doing the same kinds of work with story. It's
Yeah.
just that someone does the actual typing and the other person does more of the, dramaturgy. So I feel like there's a kinship. We have to be the same on some level in order to understand that we're both going in the same direction. But
When when you were younger, did you think about writing, or or you just kind of got into the creative exec and realized, "Hey, I'm pretty good at this actually, writing."
no, I wanted to be a writer. I knew from a very young age that I loved writing. I created my own magazines when I was a kid, but I was also in the Beverly High theater group. So I was doing a lot of acting and dancing, and I really wanted to be a dancer. My first love was wanted to be a part of, the New York City Ballet or ABT, but I just didn't have the body for it, and I didn't really understand that there was a whole world out there of Alan Ailey and Dance Theater of Harlem where that somebody who had my sort of musculature could really find, I'm short and thick, that I could find a place. And I think if I had had that, I would never be talking to you right now. I would be trying to become Julia Prowse. But I loved writing. I wrote for myself. And the reason that I took this change, this sort of detour into being an executive, is that I knew I had that skill and I was writing my samples. This is back in the late 80s, late 80s. And I was writing and did not see myself reflected in any of the writing staffs that were around at the time. That my parents are going to need me to stop um, being supported by them. I'm going to have to get a real job. And so I ended up going the executive route, and still though working, of course, very closely with writers, which was the thing that sort of fed me and made me feel that I was a part of this industry, and I really, really loved it. So
Right.
I've always written. I have just scads of scripts that are in a wicker basket in my closet. I have not looked at them because I'm afraid of what I might find, but I did crack open my first designing women's spec, and it was actually pretty good. And I think I only really had someone had given me one note on it. And of course, when I thought back about that note, it was in red ink, and I thought, oh my God, he hated it. It was one note, and it was not even a bad note. So I'm thinking, well, boy, did I have that persecution syndrome, where I thought, oh my God, one note in red pen is going to be, is going to devastate me.
Yeah, but you don't know what you don't know.
And I remember at this point, as I was living on National Boulevard, I remember exactly where I was when I had this conversation with myself. I was on an Apple Macintosh computer, and I was realizing that I felt as though I didn't have enough information. I didn't think that my stories were important enough. And I started to put it aside for a while, not realizing that I just wasn't looking in the right place for those stories. I was thinking about concept as opposed to character. And I think now when I look back on it, I think if I had mentored myself as a young person, I would have said, "No, you're headed in the right direction. You need to go deeper, not wider. You don't need to come up with better, more concepts. They just need to be more about you. You have to find there is there is story in your background and in who you are right now. You're not looking in the right place." So I think I would have mentored myself better.
One of my favorite things in your book is crafting your personal narrative that I kind of feel flows right into what you were saying. Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. This is an exercise that I used when I've actually used this quite a bit. So I've always done something sort of similarly in when I talk to people about telling the story of their resume. When I was doing a lot of recruiting at NBC Universal, but it worked really really well also when I was at HBO, and we're having the writers and directors talk about themselves, because part of them being able to sell themselves is them being able to discuss their brand, but also discuss their background, so that someone can understand, this is where who you are and how you're different from someone else, and then how you can use that story to propel you forward in your career. So I have people draw an oval in the middle of the page sideways, and then put 7 tick marks around the outside of it so it looks like a little bug. And then each one of those tick marks, they need to draw a picture that represents a place where they are at a particular point in their lives. You usually start with your birth, so it's draw a symbol of what where you grew up. And then there's usually one that's the second one is usually around somewhere between 7 to 13. Something happened in your life. Sometimes that's a move, or someone passed away, or there's something that happened in your life where you realize that you are different from your peers. It's 13 is usually a coming of age in many cultures, so it's something happened to you at that point in your life that really sort of cemented the rest of your young adulthood. And then the third one is, typically for me, it's college. It might be something in that young 20s kind of area. For me, I draw in that one. I just draw a symbol of Vassar College, which is a V and a C, sort of mushed together. And then the other ones are again seminal moments in your life where you have become the person that you are now as an artist. Someone said to me, I think this was actually Pete Chapman, said he looks at it as where you can see that there was a before and after. So before this happened, I was this person. After this thing happened, my life was different as well. And then by the end, you've gotten to the place, that seventh tick mark is where you are now. And then in the middle of that open space in the middle, I like to have people draw a picture of where they would like to be. So what is your dream job? What do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? And I think when I did this most recently, in that center circle was a picture of me in a writer's room. And then miraculously, not that long afterwards, I actually got in a writer's room. So
Yay.
it's a way for you to outline in 7 really distinct and very specific moments. That's going to be your talking points, essentially. So when you go into a meeting with an executive or a writer or showrunner, you have a story to tell. You won't be fumfering over yourself, because you'll visually remember what those moments are in your circle. It's only 7 things, and then the thing in the middle is they will eventually ask you, well, where do you see yourself, or where can I help you get to? That you'll want to be able to have an answer for that.
That
But
is so brilliant.
yeah, I think it really helps. I think it also helps because once you have done that exercise and you tell someone your story, then they can sort of feed back to you, "Oh, this is what I thought was really the most interesting part," or "Can you tell me more about this?" Or, when you talked about your mother's passing, your I could see that there was emotion behind it. What's that like for you? And that will then help you really create a narrative around who you are, so that then people really will lean in and understand, oh, here's where here's where you have a lot of story, or here's what I'm really excited about you because you have this really interesting background. So there's a lot of things that can come out of listening to yourself tell that story, and for others to hear that story, and then to talk to you about how they were affected by it.
Say I was lucky enough to get a meeting with you back in the day. This is with regards to your chapter, Picking Your Lane. And I want to write for a 1 hour drama. But I also edit videos for my friends and I direct YouTube videos. And my dog's really cute. And I think it should be in commercials. And should I just like tell you all that? Just get it all out there in that meeting?
I think you certainly can. I think, again, all of this is up to you, and this is how you want to present yourself. So there are no right and wrong answers on any of this. Again, I think if you've done the exercise of crafting a personal narrative, you should have a story to tell. Your dog may or may not fit into that story, and it might be something that sort of becomes a side part of your narrative. So I would say if your dog videos are part of who you feel is part of your brand and is part of your, it's really, really important that someone understands that, because maybe you're going up for a job where the person is a YouTube influencer. Absolutely use that. But not everything will fit into every conversation organically. You may find, though, that the conversation sort of meanders into that space, which is fine too. There's no right and wrong rules. I think you just have to be careful that you're not going to bombard your listener with irrelevant factoids that may not give you the desired results. So if you see their eyes starting to glaze over, maybe back it up a little bit. Maybe don't tell them about the dog. But if they have a dog and they've been making videos too, it's a great way to connect. So that's up
Yeah.
to you.
Speaking of meetings, you wrote that while you were in the Fox comedy department, you were expected to bring in 10 new show ideas to your Monday morning staff meetings. Wow, that is not for the faint of heart. Did you ever have a weekend? That's tough. Can you tell me about that?
It is tough. It actually got really, really easy. And I now use that exercise, or I used that exercise when I was in the very last day of my workshop, because you'll find out that it's really a lot easier than you think. Now, in the beginning, it was really hard because I didn't realize that every idea that I had was something that somebody else had already had. That somebody, my boss had heard every pitch on the planet. So, when I brought in my 10 terrible ideas, he was like, nope, it's already been done. It's already been done. So I had to get a lot more clever. But here's how I had to do it. So this is back in the old days. This is in the 80s. Now, let's see. This is in the 90s. So this was 92 to 97. Back in the old days when people actually bought magazines. So it's not for the digital age in the same way. But I would go to this newsstand on a Saturday and purchase as many magazines as I possibly could. Probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 magazines. And I would get a variety of them. This would be for my month, but it would be Home and Garden, Glamour, whatever, Mademoiselle, whatever it is, but also things like Car and Driver and, you know, fishing things and motorcycle magazines, but anything that sort of was anything, and at the time I think they had a Spin magazine was out. There were all sorts of like the Source. You could get Rolling Stone, but there was like a variety of different kinds of magazines. And I would go through and I would rip out the pages of the things that I thought were interesting. And I would rip them out, and then I would have to clip the articles, so staple each article separately, and then do a cover sheet. And the cover sheet had the the title of the new show that I was pitching, and then a little one-line description, a log line, and then I would put them all on top of the stack of articles. And that was my Monday morning packet. And I had to do this every single week. I had to come in with 10. And and like I said, I got better and better and better at this. Now, what this taught me was that there are ideas everywhere. And really the trick of it is I could find a magazine picture of, I don't know, guy with a weird suit and crazy hair.
Hmm.
Marry that character. I would come up with a character for that guy and put him in the most unlikely situation. So if that person is my pitch might have been this guy goes back to school, I don't know, for underwater sea diving. I don't know, whatever it is. But you can find a if you find something like remember this is comedy. So comedy is and actually drama too, but comedy primarily is, it's hero goal obstacle and then sort of an ironic twist. So the irony of that is that this is the most unlikely person to be in this situation, and that gives you your comedy. So I kind of think of it, if you remember the Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, when Martin Lawrence did it, it was a hilarious idea, not a hilarious movie, but a hilarious idea because of all people in the world, the last person in the world who should have been going back to King Arthur's Court is Martin Lawrence. So there's immediate comedy, and we can see what comedy is. So that's all I did. I was searching for, well, what's an interesting character, and then where can I put that character that gives us the most conflict? And that's sort of the formula. And then you realize, oh, it's not really about the concept so much as it is about the character. So it's a really great exercise. And so I would do that my with my writers. I would give them 5 minutes to tear up any magazines that they possibly could and come up with a great, twist on, hey, this is this might look like Hillary Clinton, but if I put Hillary Clinton in the worst, if Hillary Clinton had to live in the hood for a year, that would be a funny show. So how do you make that happen?
Writers out there, this is such amazing advice that you're getting here. Kelly, that's so smart. My last question for you, and thank you so much for your time. Starting out, what was your biggest misconception of what it meant to be working in this industry?
I think that my biggest misconception is that the best wins. That this is a town based on merit. This is not a town based on merit. This is a town based on relationships. It's based on ease. So you can be the best writer on the planet and never get noticed. You can be William Goldman hiding under a rock if no one knows you, if you're not out there meeting people and showing them your work, you don't get to get your thing made. So I really, really wish that wasn't true, but I've seen it time and time again where it's the person who's connected who wins. It's not necessarily the person who's the best at their ability of their so unfortunately it's a terrible way to end, but I will say that means that, see, look, here's the
Work
upside.
out.
The
Yeah, just
upside of that whole thing is that you can be incredibly mediocre and have a very good career in this town, which is all we all want, right? We want to be mediocre and make a living. So
exactly.
at the very end of the day, there's a range of experiences and abilities, and everyone can have a seat at the table. We just have to we have to, obviously make sure that there are enough chairs so that everyone who wants to belly up to the table can have a space. But
Yes.
it's not rocket science.
Those are very wise and true words. Kelly Edwards, I have so enjoyed this time talking to you. And I thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and helping everybody out there. And can we find you on social media? Did you want to share anywhere that you are?
Although I'm not on Twitter, so you'll have to
Oh,
find me. Not for the time being. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I have a website at kellyedwards.co.co. And then I go to a lot of festivals. I just came back from Austin and had a great time. I think I did 3 panels and then 3 roundtables, had an amazing time, met some phenomenal people. And then I was at Catalyst for that. So I run around. So I'm around.
yay. Well, thank you so much. You're really going to help a lot of our listeners.
Thank you. I'm a little traumatized by that shark question, but I'm gonna try to roll with it.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, and thrive. Till we get to hang out again, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards. Executive producer, Kristen O'Verne. Producers, Terry Sampson and Sandy Adamitis. Music by Ethan Stoller.